Our story begins today with two men, one a colonel in the British Army and the other an academic from the University of Edinburgh. Together, both men became the inspiration for one of English literature's best characters, well, at least in my opinion. Professor of physiology at Edinburgh University, by the way, I also studied there, so he must be good. For over 25 years in the mid to late 19th century, Professor William Rutherford would never have guessed that his former student, one Arthur Doyle, would use him as a model for one of his most beloved adventure works. Though from looking at Rutherford, we can see he served mostly as an inspiration for the character's appearance. The character's more adventurous side was inspired by a friend of the now Arthur Conan Doyle, a colonel in the British Army by the name of Percy Fawcett, a name you have heard recently on this channel, and if you have read David Gann's Lost City of Zed, then you know exactly who I'm talking about. Fawcett was a famed explorer of South America and the Amazon, and together with Rutherford they inspired the character of Professor Challenger in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. Hello and welcome to Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark, and another episode of Beyond the Book. To my mind, The Lost World, I should probably show it, shouldn't I? It's about that time, isn't it, to show off the book. The Lost World, here it is one of the greatest adventure stories ever written. And if you haven't read it, then you must remedy the situation and join us with reading it in the second week of August as part of our August of Adventures readathon that myself, Sean D. Standfast, and Mark Richardson are undertaking. Naturally, of course, The Lost World is not based on a true story, but the scenes of South America that are described in the book come from the writings of Doyle's friend, the said Colonel Fawcett, minus the dinosaurs, of course, though other monsters Fawcett did come into contact with and have since proven to have existed, or still exist even, such as an anaconda, a big giant anaconda that he came across. Oh yes, and spoilers, sorry, there are dinosaurs in this book, so if you haven't read it yet, be warned. There are awesome dinosaurs in this book as well as other things, but then of course I suppose the cover probably gives it away. Bear in mind that the dinosaur did not loom as large in the public consciousness as they do now, and part of the reason they're so popular today with children and adults everywhere is, I think, due in part to this book. Sadly though, when you type The Lost World into Google, the film of the same name comes up, and it's the film based on the Jurassic Park franchise, which of course is good, but it's a shame that this wonderful original doesn't get top billing. And none of that would exist if Conan Doyle hadn't paved the way with The Lost World. Conan Doyle had become tired of his most famous literary creation, one Sherlock Holmes, so he embarked on the notion of writing another series, and this time the hero would be basically the exact opposite of the super sleuth. And when you read the description of Professor Challenger, you can certainly see it. He sat in a rotating chair behind a broad table, which was covered with his books, maps, and diagrams. As I entered, his seat spun round to face me. His appearance made me gasp. I was prepared for something strange, but not for so overpowering a personality as this. It was his size which took one's breath away. His size and his imposing presence. His head was enormous, the largest I have ever seen upon a human being. I am sure that his top hat, had I ever ventured to don it, would have slipped over me entirely and rested on my shoulders. He had the face and beard which I associate with an Assyrian bull, the former florid, the latter so black as almost to have a suspicion of blue. Spade-shaped and rippling down over his chest. The hair was peculiar, plastered down in front in a long, curving wisp over his massive forehead. The eyes were blue-grey under great black tufts, very clear, very critical, and very masterful. A huge spread of shoulders and a chest like a barrel were the other parts of him which appeared above the table, save for two enormous hands covered with long black hair. This and a bellowing, roaring, rumbling voice made up my first impression of the notorious Professor Challenger. He had sprung to his feet with a mad rage in his eyes. Even at the moment of tension, I found time for amazement at the discovery that he was quite a short man, his head not higher than my shoulder, a stunted Hercules whose tremendous vitality had all run to depth, breadth, and brain. He had swung round his revolving chair so as to face me, and he sat all puffed out like an enormous bullfrog, his head laid back, and his eyes half covered by supercilious lids. Now he suddenly turned himself sideways, and all I could see of him was tangled hair with a red, protruding ear. So there you go. Handsome devil. I feel a bit sorry for Professor Rutherford, though, because if I show you the picture of him, then you'll see that he, kind of is what Challenger's supposed to look like. So I'm not sure Doyle was particularly kind in using him as inspiration, but thankfully he was deceased by the time the book came out, so he wouldn't have known it. So Conan Doyle used Colonel Fawcett's notes from his Bolivian expedition to help him with the writing of The Lost World, which was published in 1912. Fawcett wrote in his memoirs, which were published posthumously, monsters from the dawn of man's existence might still roam these heights unchallenged, imprisoned and protected by unscalable cliffs. So thought Conan Doyle when later in London I spoke of these hills and showed him photographs of them. He mentioned an idea for a novel on Central South America and asked for information, which I told him I should be glad to supply. The fruit of it was his Lost World in 1912, appearing as a serial in the Strand magazine and subsequently in the form of a book that achieved widespread popularity. And as part of the marketing campaign for the book, yes, I guess they sometimes did marketing campaigns, the publishers released this photograph. This photograph, I'll get it right eventually one day. This photograph, which shows Conan Doyle disguised as Professor Challenger. The book proved to be very popular and sparked a whole Professor Challenger series, which I actually also have here, Challenger and Company. So it's the collection of all the books that feature Challenger. They're not all novels, a couple of short stories or novellas, but they are good. Sparked a whole Professor Challenger series, and it has been made into several films, TV series, and radio productions, and of course adapted into different forms as well, which of course were inspired by this work. Take Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park and The Lost World books as prime examples. I suppose, if you don't know, you're wondering what became of Colonel Fawcett. Well, we don't really know what happened to him. He went off in search of a lost world himself, well, a lost city to be exact, and unfortunately he was never heard of again. Thank you very much for watching. Do take care, everybody. Thanks really for joining us, and see you next time. Bye for now.
Better